Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a very special webinar which will help you achieve entrepreneurial success in 2014. I'm Vasil Azarov, Online Events Manager at Business to Community, and this webinar today is brought to you by Startup Socials and San Francisco American Marketing Association. Startup Socials is a global community of entrepreneurs built by entrepreneurs who are passionate about connecting, empowering people in the startup ecosystem. We host social and educational events around the globe where you can network, learn, and create new relationships for your current and future startup ventures. You can learn more about our upcoming events by visiting startupsocials.com. The San Francisco chapter of the American Marketing Association has been serving the Bay Area marketing community for over 75 years. Through programs, events, workshops, and discussions, they introduce the latest trends and developments in the industry to network, and from networking events that bring together the best marketing minds in the region. You can learn more about the organization by visiting sfima.org. A few housekeeping reminders before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link within 24 hours of today's broadcast. If you have any questions for our presenters today, please post them in the chat box at the bottom corner of your screen. And if you would like to tweet key takeaways from today's webinar, you can use hashtag B2C Online. Again, it's B2C Online. I'm very excited to welcome today's moderator today, who will introduce our presenter, David Spark. David Spark is a veteran tech journalist and founder of the Spark Media Solutions. Spark has reported on the tech scene and lean startup for more than 18 years in more than 40 media outlets. He blogs regularly at the Spark Minute, or you can also listen to him weekly on his roundtable podcast, The Tear Down Show. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to David. David, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Vasil. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I see a huge slew of people that are in the who are listening right now, participants, and I may call people out by name to just make sure that you're listening to this webinar, like Dan Adams or Derek Poulin or Ed Smith or Herodi Bovebays. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, or Jane Flint. So if any of you are listening, I'm paying attention to you too. So as Vasil mentioned, that we do have opportunity for you to ask questions. Two different ways you can ask questions. If you're logged into the ReadyTalk conference system, you can just ask questions through that system, or feel free to ask your question on Twitter or make a comment about what we're talking about on Twitter. Just remember to include the hashtag B2C Online, all one word, B2C Online. Include that hashtag. And also, you might want to include the Twitter handles of the person I'm speaking with and myself. The Twitter handle for Brant is Brant Cooper, BrantCooper, but it's also on that screen there. Or my Twitter handle, which is DSpark, the letter D and then Spark. So I would love to introduce our awesome subject for our discussion, and that is Brant Cooper, who is the author of The Lean Entrepreneur, a New York Times bestseller, and he has 16 years experience working in this space, helping companies bring innovative products to market. He previously authored a book, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development, which is actually what we're going to be talking about today. And what he does as his business when he's not writing incredibly successful books is he advises innovation practices of such leading companies as Qualcomm, Intuit, Capital One, Pitney Bowes, and Hewlett-Packard through his company, Moves the Needle Group. So Brant, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, David, and thanks for hosting, Vasil.
Okay, well, so I want to begin my very first question, before I actually jump into the first question, just a few things I also want to mention out. Please ask questions at any time. Don't hesitate. Just throw out questions at any time to the people who are listening, and we'll try to answer these as fast as we can. So my first question has to actually kind of do with the name of your company. So it's called Moves the Needle Group, and it's what you purport to actually do. Now, personally, I use this term when I think a company is shooting a little too low, doesn't have time or budget, or they just want to, quote, test the waters. And I always respond in a situation like that, yes, you could do that, but you're not, quote, going to move the needle. That's why I love the name of your company. So can you tell me, this is what I'm really interested in, your definition of this. Can you tell me the difference between a good, interesting customer development effort and one that truly moves the needle? What is that difference?
So the moves the needle is really getting people to focus on actionable items inside their organization that are game changers, that are revenue changers, that are going to allow you to achieve your objectives. So from a customer development standpoint, it really depends upon the phase that you're in as a business. Where are you? Are you first trying to figure out whether you're building a product or your product idea has any viability? Then the customer development that would move the needle at that point is to get out into the world, get out of the building, as Steve Blank would say, and go find a set of customers or potential customers that actually are passionate about this problem that you're trying to solve. If you're further down the road and you have, a dozen customers, or you might have 100 customers, or depending on your business model, you might have thousands of customers, what would move the needle of your organization in that phase? Have you plateaued? Do you need to modify your business model so that you're getting more revenue because the cost of acquiring those customers is too high relative to how much money you're making off of them? So it's being able to identify that metric that's going to significantly impact your organization at that phase of your company. And so that latter example, if you were going to do some customer development around that, you might be running experiments on increasing the price, for example, or it could be that you're going out and trying to find a new market segment, and you're doing that by interviewing customers and seeing if that's a customer base that would be willing to pay a little bit more or will stay subscribed. So it's very case specific, but the idea is to learn from your customers what is going to allow you to have a near-term impact on the business achieving its objectives.
So I want to focus on that, learn from your customers. Let's say I don't fully know what my idea is, and because of that, I don't even know, I'm in the sort of the ideation phase of my concept. I don't know exactly who my customers are, but more importantly, how do I sort of extrapolate and learn who potential customers are beyond the obvious? So the general concept of pushing out an app, which I'm guessing many of the people who are listening are trying to develop some type of service that will that can scale, that can get a lot of people to use it. That's often the audience for the lean startup space. So if I don't even know who my customers are, because I have yet to bring on customer number one, how do I explore that space to even learn who potentially my customers are?
Right. Well, okay, so not to be flippant, but if you've already built an app and you don't know who your customers are, I think you've done it wrong. No,
I was actually but I'm saying actually before that. That is a good point to make. But I'm saying you're just in the ideation phase. And I'm saying that's probably what a lot of people are doing on this call. I'm guessing. Tell me if I'm wrong, please. People listening, I'm speaking to you, Jane Westfall and Jennifer Wolf and Flo Beigju. Tell me if you're doing something that's not the case. But I'm talking about ideation. I don't even know who my customers are because I haven't created a product, therefore I don't yet have a first customer. So how do I determine what that spectrum of customers are?
So most people I'm working with have some idea of the space that they want to work in. There are other ways of going. Personally, I don't believe lean startup or even customer development is about ideation. Most of the people I work with are ones that have some clue of the problem that they're trying to solve, or maybe they, certainly a lot of entrepreneurs today are trying to solve their own problem. So it's not necessarily that you have crystallized around a particular solution, but there's some context that you're in, and there's some idea that there's a problem here to be solved. And so I think what I counsel people to do is to not rely purely on themselves. Like you can be your own market segment, but you want to validate it outside yourself. And what you're trying to do is you're looking for patterns. And so there are a lot of different ways to go out and try to find groups of users that are alike. But one little hack that I like is using meetup.com. Meetup.com is an amazing amalgamation of market segments. So a market segment is not it's not a customer demographic. It's not a product category. It's not a vertical. You're not going to sell a product to the healthcare industry or the financial services industry. What you're looking for is a group of people who share the same problem or passion and speak the same language. And by speak the same language, I mean that these people will actually refer to each other for solutions to that problem or products within a realm. That's
a key point right there, the referring to each other for solutions. So, and we're already getting some questions in from the audience, and it actually has to do with reaching out to your customers. Bob Goodson actually asks, so how do you get to know your customers without being annoying so they don't perceive you're trying to sell them? Like, look, I'm just in the initial phase, Brant. I honestly, all I want to do is I want to interview you to see if this is viable, if this is the right way to market, and then potentially maybe sell to you down the line. But how does that engagement begin, and actually could potentially make it fun for people?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different methods. It kind of depends on, I believe, in what category your product's in, and if you're going after people that are in the action sports industry, how you might address them is different than if you were selling business to business. I think early on, what you want to do is you want to project your enthusiasm about this space, but it's also what you're really going for is empathy. And whenever you're trying to be empathetic, you're thinking of the customers and the emotions that they're going through. And so in the business-to-business world, for example, you might be leveraging their expertise. So you're reaching out to them in a way that says, it's non-salesy, and it says, listen, I'm doing research in this space. You have vast amounts of experience in this space, and I would just love to be able to buy you a cup of coffee and talk to you about your ideas. And in return, I can tell you what I'm up to, and you can have input into it, or I can give you some results of my market research if you think that would be interesting. Any sort of hook little there that might provide impetus to these people. But often, I think that often this is the reason why people are nervous about this is simply they assume that they're going to get shut down. And in my experience, most people want to help. Customers want to talk about their problems. Industry experts want to talk about their expertise. And so that the biggest hurdle is that first step. It's just asking. So there's a technique that I call flipping the conversation. It's actually an old sales technique that's used by people to get a conversation going. And so it goes something like, what I'm going to do is talk about problems that I assume the customer has, and I'm going to flip it back over to them and ask them if they have these problems. So I can say, hi, I'm Brant Cooper. I help startups get started. When I talk to entrepreneurs, often I hear problems like they don't know how to find their early customers. They don't know how to identify if they're early adopters. They don't know how to start conversations. Do you have any of those issues? So you flip the conversation and you ask them if they have these problems that you're sort of assuming that they have. There's only a couple of responses you're going to get back. One might be, no, I don't have those problems. So either your problem hypotheses are wrong or you're talking to the wrong person. So you can take action on those results. Or it could be, well, I kind of have those problems, but what really stumbles me is this problem over here, right? So now you've just learned something, and you might want to pivot or iterate your ideas based upon that feedback. Or it could be, yes, I have those problems. Boy, can you help me solve them? So this flipping of the conversation is a nice way that you're not talking about yourself, but you're talking about these customers' problems.
Right, and that's a really good point. So Jennifer Wolf brought up a question that's near and dear to my heart. So she has a service business, a service contractor business, and works in a business-to-business environment. That's pretty much how my business operates as well. And I always kind of assume that this lean entrepreneur and the lean startup concept is all about scalable businesses and not about service business. So my question is, can you give any advice to myself and to Jennifer Wolf? What is a good way to approach if you're a service business, is there any different way that you approach than if you're creating a scalable product type business and you're trying to approach a brand new customer market? Is there some magical solution to that, or is it the same as everything else you've been saying?
Okay, now come on, David. You know that there's no magic bullet out there, right?
I don't. Yeah, I know. I'm just wondering if the answer to the question for a service business is any different than any of the other businesses you talk about.
Yeah, no, I actually don't think it is. I mean, one of the most common viability tests, or what also the Lean Startup community calls the minimum viable product, is called the Concierge Experiment. And the Concierge Experiment, and again, this is typically for product companies, but the experiment is to pretend you're a service company, to go and try to manually do what you hope your product will do in the future if you were to build it. And the idea there is, instead of sitting down and coding for months and building some big platform to perform this service, why don't you just go see if you can do it by hand? Because there's nothing magical about putting it into bits that makes it suddenly viable, right? So the advantage that the service company has is, well, you don't have to change what you're doing. You can actually just go out and try to provide that service. So I think that the key challenge is for the service-based companies is segmenting the market, is actually creating a hypothesis that says, here is a group of people that have this particular problem, and now I'm going to go and see if that's true, A, and B, whether they would pay for someone to solve that problem. And so I think the issues that people run into is that they actually don't go narrow enough. And so we talk a lot about, especially in the second book, The Lean Entrepreneur, we talk a lot about personas. And so a persona is a way to represent a market segment based on psychographic and behavior that you hypothesize a group of customers do. And so HubSpot is a great example. So we talked to Mike Volpe for our book, the CMO of HubSpot, and he says he can go to a networking event and he can recognize his market segment from across the floor. There's Mary the marketer. Mary the marketer is a small business person who wants to, obviously she wants to grow her business. She's trying to scale her business. And she loves marketing and wants to learn all about marketing, and she's going to do the marketing herself. This is opposed to Lou, who is a small business owner, wants to go scale his business. He recognizes that he needs marketing, but he doesn't want to do the marketing himself. Mary is the high-value customer. Lou is a good customer as well, but he's not quite as high value. He doesn't pay as much money. His lifetime value is lower. So HubSpot is happy to get Lou in an opportunistic way, but the real high-value customer that he wants to target is Mary the marketer. And he can describe Mary the marketer to such a degree that if he goes to one of these networking groups, he can actually identify them. So I think that most entrepreneurs, and this is products or services, don't really go deep enough in their personas so that they can actually go and find them in locations where they congregate. And
that's
the advantage of doing
developing personas. I like that. Go on.
Right. So in that way, you get to have high-value conversations quickly, as opposed to feeling like you're, searching for a needle in the haystack. You're going to where the needles are sold. So you have a number of people that you can have high-quality conversations with, and that will sort of give you the feeling whether there's any market demand for the service you're thinking about offering.
Okay. Let me. Ed Smith brings up an issue that I'm sure you've heard before, and this is about innovative products for which a market cannot be immediately proven. And in your video for The Lean Entrepreneur, your co-author, Patrick Vlaskovitz, claims that the theory of entrepreneurship, of the guy sitting in a garage producing an idea without testing the market, is a complete myth. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before, but isn't that the way we explain Steve Jobs and Apple? Is he the only exception to this rule? Are there any times you have to say the market doesn't know and I need to tell them? I mean, when are those moments happening?
Right.
Or maybe you don't agree with it.
Well, it's a great question because I think even Steve Jobs is representative of the myth. And so, successful entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs was for sure, and Mark Cuban like to say, oh, well, you never talk to your customer, right? The customer doesn't know. And Henry Ford supposedly said that, if he had listened to his customers, he would have built a faster buggy instead of a car,
horse,
right?
I think was the line, yeah.
Oh, sorry. He actually didn't say it, so I didn't say it very well either. But anyway, the idea is that when you're talking to your customers, you're not necessarily doing what they say. What you're doing is you're talking to the customers in order to understand them more deeply. So my response to the horse and buggy is, well, yeah, sure, if you're a sustaining innovator, right, if you're doing incremental improvements to an existing market, you take that feedback, and of course you can't build a faster horse, but you might improve the wheels of the buggy, makes the horse and buggy go faster. That would be an incremental improvement. If you're a disruptive innovator, you take that same information and you go, well, forget the buggy altogether. I'm going to go and make an electronic where we don't need the horse. I'm going to make it make an automobile. So the more disruptive you are, right? So it's a spectrum. Sustaining on one side, incremental on one side, and disruptive on the other. The more you tend to the disruptive side, the more you can't just take what your customer says at face value. You have to have different conversations with them. You can understand.
So you have to extrapolate. You've got to find the inner meaning of what they're saying. Extrapolate. Right. So yeah, the idea of the faster horse, they just want to get somewhere faster. That's the ultimate goal. They don't necessarily want a horse that's faster.
Exactly. And so, I like to say the customer owns the pain, the founder owns the vision on how they're going to resolve that pain. But real quickly, let me step back to Steve Jobs. So
sure.
Steve Jobs is supposed to be the guy that never talked to his customers, right? But if you read the biography on him, his very first customer told him exactly what to build. As a matter of fact, Steve Jobs showed up, and he had all of the components of these parts that were going to go onto a circuit board. And this is an MVP, really. This is a minimum viable product, right? He didn't invent the Apple I inside of the garage. His first product was for hobbyists, and it was a collection of parts that needed to be put together onto a board, and that was how you could build your own computer. That was actually what was going on in that garage. Well, his very first customer number one, David, said, oh, no. I'm not putting this together. You put all of this stuff together, and I'll buy 40 of them. So even there, the very first customer Steve Jobs had told him exactly what to build. Further, in my estimation, the most disruptive thing about the iPhone was not the phone itself. There were 2 decades of smartphones that preceded the iPhone. So you're able to learn quite a bit from that. The most disruptive part of the iPhone, in my opinion, was the fact that you had this open app store that third-party developers could build these applications on top of the iPhone. It turned the iPhone from a phone, essentially, to a platform. Well, Steve Jobs opposed opening up the App Store to third-party developers. So for the first year, it wasn't open. And what happened, and this was despite investors and other people inside the company and customers saying, no, it has to be open, it has to be open. That's what's going to create this revolution. And developers did it anyway, right? They hacked the phone and they started building these applications. And it was only after a year of this happening anyway, the market essentially pulling this out of Apple, did Steve Jobs relent and open up the App Store to third-party developers. He was able to protect the experience, right, because he was going to have this. There were guidelines and rules that you had to follow in order to get an approved application. So it was sort of a compromise. It was still able to fit within his vision.
But let me qualify that a little bit. But let me qualify that a little bit. That's okay. When your market comes down on you like a hammer. These are people who are entrepreneurs who don't have the market that Steve Jobs had, and therefore, and the market responding in droves saying, "You idiot! No, you got to let us in. You got to let us develop on this." These are people who don't have anybody, forcing them to do something at one point and being required to relate. My feeling is everyone listening right now would love to have that problem one day, make a mistake, and then have the whole audience, the whole market saying, no, change it, and then happily move that way.
I totally agree with you. But the point of the story was that Steve Jobs was wrong. And so my question to always to those people that bring that up is, well, if Steve Jobs was a visionary, how come he didn't see that? And so the point really is that you do have to build it to the point that the market is pulling it out of you, right? I mean, this is Mark Anderson that coined the term product market fit, is really that. And it's sort of a mythical place, I guess. It's not as, certainly people feel like it comes too easy when it's put into a nice phrase like that. But really what you do need to do, and this is why the Lean Startup talks about the minimum viable product, is you need to get something out there in front of your early adopters, not the whole market, not everybody. You're not doing a big launch, a big marketing campaign with your early prototype, with your minimum viable product. You're trying to identify your early adopters because those are the people that are going to start pulling the real value out of the product. Because as much as you think you know, you don't really know until the market has conducted the transaction. And so
that's a very good point.
Examples. Yeah, there really aren't examples of the lone guy in the garage that imagines a product and, has that eureka moment, and out comes this product, and the product, has instant overnight success, and, the market beats the path of door, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it really just does not happen that way.
Although I will say the press would love to make you think it happens that way, but we all know it doesn't.
Yes.
Because that makes a much better story.
It does. It's the myth of the visionary, and I talk about it in almost all my talks, and it's great. We're hardwired. Human beings are hardwired for stories. We love stories, and I think it's an important part of who we are and understanding our place in the world and all that. And it's great. They're fun stories. The danger is when we project our future based upon stories of the past.
Excellent. Good. Very good point. I just want to remind everybody who's listening that you're listening to myself, David Spark, and Brant Cooper. Brant Cooper is the New York Times best-selling author of The Lean Entrepreneurial. You can find him on Twitter at Brant Cooper. And I am the founder of Spark Media Solutions, and you can find me on Twitter at @DSpark. And also, to follow this conversation on Twitter, be using the hashtag B2C online, where you can also ask questions. We do have more questions that are coming in from Masood Safi and Jane Flint. I will get to them soon. And we got tons of people still online with us, like Moshe Kaplan, Patricia Hamill, Rachel Ewan. I hope you're still paying attention. Scott McReynolds, I'm also talking to you. And Sarah Delio, I'm hopefully pronouncing your names correctly. Now, I have a question about the customer development process, because one of the things that which is all we're talking about, one of the things I'm always fascinated by any marketing effort in general is that if you extrapolate far enough and think far enough, you could actually build out other parts of your business that is not marketing. For example, so my question is to you, how can your development process, the way you go through it, help chart other aspects of your business, such as product development or even hiring? We've been talking about product development, so maybe even extrapolate beyond that, hiring or something like that. How can that process help you build other things?
All right. It's a great question, David. I love to point to Brian Clark of Copyblogger, who coined the term minimum viable audience. And he likes to talk of entrepreneurs as entreproducers. And the idea really is in your customer interactions, in the relationship that you form with your customers, you're building community. And the community, again, it's centered around that definition of a market segment that I mentioned before, sharing the same problem or passion and speaking the same language. Ultimately, what you want are multiple segments, right? So you have multiple of these communities. And as you create value, not only in your products, you create value in your marketing. You're making them better business people like HubSpot does. or you're donating to causes that they care about, or maybe you're going after a green community so you lower your carbon footprint. There's all of these things that you can do outside of your product itself that creates this community, that creates passion about you and your brand and your products. And once you have this community, you can learn what other problems that you can solve, right? So that's how you can expand your product line. The big accounting firms were famous for this, right? They started out as, hey, I'll do your accounting, and they would get so involved and they would overhear a conversation where, boy, it sure would be great if somebody could manage my IT. And the accounting firms would go, oh, yeah, we can do that too, right? Even if they had never hired somebody to do IT in the past. But it's being involved in your customers' lives and having this relationship that allows you to learn what are some other problems that we can solve. Is that part of our value, our vision, or is that something that we don't want to pursue? And you've got multiple communities, multiple problems to be solved. This is how you can expand your product base. It's also how you can make your marketing more efficient and your selling more efficient, because you know these people inside and out. You know where they live. You know who influences their purchasing. You know what other related products that would maybe round out your experience. So there's all sorts of things that you can continue to learn through the whole life cycle of your customer in order to make them passionate and loyal to your brand and allow you to grow your business in that way.
Just taking an offshoot question here. You've worked with so many entrepreneurs, and so you know behaviorally how they operate. And I'm sure you've seen some do much better than others. Some actually fail. So I want to know, think about the absolute best entrepreneurs you personally know and have worked with side by side, you know intimately. What are the characteristics, the behavioral characteristics that just set them so far apart and cause them to make those relationships with people that are so critical, that people are so eager, like, oh my God, I want to work with you. Kind of that Steve Jobs, thing where everyone's so gung-ho of having an Apple product because they felt sort of some kind of a connection to Steve Jobs because he was so passionate about himself. What is those behavioral characteristics that set those entrepreneurs apart that you've noticed?
Well, so this is a great way for me to explain why Steve Jobs is a visionary. So if it's not because he had envisioned these products, it was because of the change that he wanted to make in the world. It was the passion, right? So true visionaries are those that relentlessly pursue the change that they want to see in the world, not any specific vision. And so the most extraordinary entrepreneurs that I work with, and the most extraordinary entrepreneurs I think that have existed, are those that relentlessly pursue change. And of course, I personally think small change for some people is just as good as big change, right? I mean, I think if people listening are empowered to improve their job status by bringing innovation into their organization, I think that that's a win. If people are deciding that they don't want to work in their job anymore, and so they're going to go and become a solo entrepreneur, and they're going to build a business that's just enough to sustain their family and their lifestyle, that's a huge win. But then again, there are those people that are out changing the world, right? And they want to change the world. And I think that those are the ones that we all tend to gravitate towards as being the amazing entrepreneurs, because they're just not going to let anything to stop them, right? Steve Jobs surrounded himself with amazing people like John Ives, who is really the designer of the iPhone. And he didn't allow his own mistakes. When he was wrong, he didn't allow that to stop him. He relentlessly pursued the change that he wanted. And so I think that's the number one characteristic, is relentlessly pursuing the change. The second is that they're trying to create value and not wealth. Well, the nicest side effect of creating value, or not necessarily the nicest, but one of the side effects of successfully creating value is that you also create wealth. But it's not the driving factor. The driving factor is trying to find new value that they can provide to real people, and in that way, that's really the change that they're making. So
I like that. Relentlessly wanting change, always trying to provide value and not wealth. Now, I should couch, I'm noticing some of the questions are very specific to people saying that they've got specific businesses and they want advice for their specific businesses. They're kind of general questions. So I'm just going to mention these types of companies, these types of businesses, and I want you to just be thinking about them as I'm asking you the next questions, okay?
Okay.
So just keep these in mind, because these questions are a little too general enough, and they're kind of, you're kind of floundering, I would think. So just think about online subscription models, think about that, and I also want you to think about just, the technique of approaching people in new industries. Like, for example, we're landing a new client in the legal space ourselves. I've never been in the legal space ourselves, and how we went about it is we just started attending some legal events and started approaching and actually interviewing people that way. And that was how we landed this kind of business, I would say. But here's my next question. All entrepreneurs are working like crazy, and there's always a list of projects they want to get to, but they can't. Okay, no entrepreneur works 9 to 5. I know that. So, what have you seen every entrepreneur do that you can recommend they stop doing? Like, oh my God, just stop this. You're wasting your time. This is not going to help you gain a single customer. Just stop doing this. What do you recommend?
Stop.
And you've seen this. This is behavior you've actually witnessed. And you're like, oh my God, just stop doing this.
Stop building features.
I'm sorry, which is stop building features. That's a good tip. Like, can you give me an example of what you saw and what you witnessed?
Well,
and how people get wrapped up in this.
Right. It's almost every entrepreneur I face wants two things. They want more features in their product, and they want more eyeballs on their product. And they think that magically more eyeballs and more features is going to get you to this nirvana of product market fit. And it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. It's fewer features and the right eyeballs. And so if I could, I ask entrepreneurs all the time, what's the one thing you need? And they say 1,000 customers. I go, yeah, that sounds great. Everybody has 1,000 customers. How many do you have? And they go, 0. You don't need 1,000. You don't need 1,000. You need 1. Right? You actually start.
You need one customer to love it and tell everybody else.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Marketing. People are going to get tired of me saying this, but I'm going to continue to say it. Marketing is not about creating buzz. It's about amplifying the buzz that your product already creates. If there's an old advertising adage. The best way to kill a bad product is great marketing, great advertising. So you have to make sure that you've got this value proposition. What is the specific functionality, the specific service that I'm providing that people are so passionate about it, they're telling their friends. They're inviting their friends. They're willing to do a case study. They'll do a press release with me. What is the value that I'm providing that results in passionate behavior? That's when you know when you're ready to build the features that they want. That's when you're ready to go find more of those type of people, because for every one that you bring in, they're putting new prospects into the top of your funnel because they're telling their colleagues.
So do you think, going back to something earlier you said you think people had the fear of rejection out there. And do you think the reason people are building more features is because people make requests for new things, and or they, you just think, oh, it would be cool if we added this, be cool if we added that, and that really some of the hardest parts of being an entrepreneur is putting the work down and talking and just listening to what people have to say. And literally, like I said, he's like, oh, I just went to this new conference in this market I've never been to, the legal space, and that was a new experience. I mean, is that really kind of the core to it? Is that people breaking out of their shell and doing things they're uncomfortable doing, and also being scared of that, of that potential rejection?
Yes, in one word, yes. And it's,
all right.
It's understandable, right? I mean, I think that people are going after this market, and they're going, listen, if I don't have something that is just amazing, these people are going to laugh me out of the building. They're never going to talk to me again. And it's really why I'm telling you, you don't go and talk about your solution right away. Go and talk about that customer's problem. If you actually talk to a customer about their problem, and oh, by the way, you have a solution, that person's going to be your best friend. If you just go try to pitch a solution, you're actually not finding out if they even have the problem. And so I think it's, if you put down the features, if you put down the feature development, if you're willing to get outside the building and go talk to these people, you're forming relationships from the first conversation. So this isn't, I like to have people think about forming a customer advisory board. So if you're doing a consumer-facing app, go find 10 customers, 10 potential customers who are passionate about the problem you're trying to solve. And so your only conversations at that point are about the problem that you're trying to solve. Next conversation, you start talking about, well, here's how I'm planning on solving that, and what's the reaction to that? So if you still need 10 people now that are on your customer advisory board that, number one, are passionate about the problem you're trying to solve, and number two, they're fully on board with the way you're proposing to solve it. Anybody drops off that advisory board, go back out into the real world and get it back up to 10. If you're in the business-to-business world, try to think of, 3 to 5 customers that are in that. And so you're forming relationships with these people from the get-go that are going to help pull that product out of you that solves real problems, and that from the get-go they're excited about you addressing those.
Let me ask you a little bit of a technical question in terms of asking the question. Now, talking to those 10 people, having those one-to-one conversations is great, and I strongly support that. But what happens when you go to that next step of, okay, now I need to survey an even bigger group, and I don't really have a big group to survey. I don't have a big Twitter following or a Facebook or LinkedIn following. Are there tools or spending money on, I know I've seen techniques where you spend money on Google AdWords to test, different theories and concepts or book titles or whatever. Are there any survey tools or tools that you've used that you think are valuable, or techniques you think are valuable to start to survey that larger audience asking those questions?
I think that, yes, I think when you get to that point, traditional, or not really traditional, but surveys, like survey tools like SurveyMonkey or Wufoo or Rapid Engage are valuable tools. I always say that you should continue to talk to customers live and in person in order to make sure that your surveys are calibrated correctly. In other words, you should be hearing in person similar to the results that you're getting in the survey, or something's off somewhere. But so if you're using surveys, certainly pushing them out via social media works. That includes LinkedIn. There are people that do reach out to people using Craigslist even. Mm-hmm. Again, it has to be right.
I didn't even think of that. That's unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to make sure you're thinking about that this is your market segment, that these are people that are going to be similar around your, the context of your problem. I was mentioning earlier meetup.com. The fact that you were going to networking meetings for attorneys is exactly right on, right? I mean, that's where they live, right? So think about, where does your customer live? The other thing is that if you're thinking about a specific customer segment, where you've got, again, people that share the same problem, they're likely to be influenced by similar people. And so if you can reach out to the influencer, right? So do these people read the same blog? So is there an influential blogger that actually can reach larger numbers of these people? If you're able to do that, then that's one way that you can start expanding your list. But the idea here is that you're always maintaining these people, right? This isn't sort of one shot and go away. I'm building my own list. And so this is why content marketing and working hard to get your Twitter following going are important, because as you scale, as you need to talk to more people, it's up to you to have been building that database of people that you need to reach out to.
Very good point. Hey, I want to let everybody know that who's listening right now, we only have a few minutes left, probably about less than 10 minutes left, actually, 7:10. So if you've got some questions, please throw them in. There's still tons of you, I hope, actually paying attention. I'm talking to you, Yvonne Chan and Stephen Harvey, and did I mention Masood Safi and Marie Beth Lorenzo? If you're still paying attention, please ask a question, one or two we got left in time here. I like the Craigslist thing. Are there good you mentioned this earlier. It's like, hey, like if you answer these questions for me, I'll give you some access to my survey data, or I'll let you know what I'm up to and things like that. And I agree with you in general. Most people like to help. Most people like to be asked for their ideas. I mean, it's actually a theory that has built my own business as well. But I'm interested to know, have you seen anything super creative in the return the favor for thanks for giving me information? What are some examples of really creative returns of favor? You know, not just obviously the product ultimately would be the favor, but are there any sort of creative things that you've seen in terms of thanks for helping me out, here's some valuable thing back to you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think it's so varied by market segments and your own relationships and that sort of thing. I think that what worked, for example, in my book, which Patrick and I treated the book like a startup, and so the type of favors that we would do would be, you know, this is sort of more on an influencer level, I think, but it's what are they trying to accomplish? So it's sort of more the classic pay it forward example, right? So if I'm trying to get to a larger customer base and expand my network, I go to an influencer there and I say, well, listen, what is one of your endeavors that I can help with? And you hustle and you help them, and in return they help you, and maybe launches a blog post or whatever.
Mm-hmm. This all sounds good. So, okay, I'm seeing a few more questions are coming in right now. I don't even think this can be done, but I'll ask the question anyways. Comes from Becky Swafford. I'd like to know how you can gauge customer desire and attribute trade-offs without data. That's even possible?
Well, I think that we're using a pretty broad definition of data here, right? So,
yeah.
You know, data can be maybe in sort of the lowest form of data could be answering a survey question, or it could be a response that you get just in a phone interview is what we're considering data. The problem, of course, in those examples is what's the currency, and by that we want the customer to sort of have to give up something in order to tell you how great they think your idea is, or then there's sort of very little value in that data. I'm wondering if you might be able to ask a follow-up question, because I'm not sure. This seems like there maybe is some
I'm not sure too. And also, I'm sorry, Jane Flint. I'm a little confused by your. I mean, I think we Jane, correct me if we were answering it already, but you asked about any recommendations. Where do those pre-market conversations happen?
All over the place, right? From a coffee.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Shop to a trade show to anywhere where you think. So part of the definition of the persona that I'm talking about, the market segment, is to ask yourself, you know, a few questions. They could be, what are 3 characteristics that's going to make this persona or this market segment step out? How are you going to pick them out of a crowd, right? So 3 characteristics, and they tend to be behavioral. And then you might ask yourself, well, what are 3 characteristics that will tell me that they're definitely not my market segment? And then you could ask questions like, well, if somebody chose this market segment, told this market segment to buy a product, right? So go buy this book or something, and the market segment went out and immediately bought that book. Who was that influencer? Was it Oprah Winfrey? You know, was it David Scott? Or the other question would be, where do these people hang out? And the hangout can be both online or offline. Are they going to a meetup event that you can find on meetup.com? Are they going to a teachers union meeting? Are they going to a trade show? Do they hang out at do they converse on a particular forum online? Are they following a specific question on Quora? I mean, you really just sort of have to think, you know, to use a worn-out phrase, it's thinking outside the box of where are they?
I think you always have to be I think you have to be top of mind of this all the time. I mean, I had friends who literally, when they were doing startups, wherever they go, wherever they had a human interaction, they'd be renting a car, buying something at McDonald's. They would be asking questions. They would be surveying people literally with every human interaction they had. and it was constant. It was nonstop.
Every conversation that you're having is informing the next conversation, right? So I mean, you're really trying to find patterns. You're trying to discover these groups of people that have the same problem or passion.
All right, I'm gonna ask this question. Mary Beth Lorenzo asks, which I think I know the answer to, and I think the answer to her question. I'm going to say the answer first. I want to know if you agree or disagree. The answer to this is instantaneously or forever, and the question is. So we're playing the Jeopardy game where I'm doing both parts, and I'm going to see if you agree or disagree. She wants to know the length of time before customers become passionate about the product. And would that be either instantly or forever and somewhere in between? Is that correct or not correct?
Yeah, it's very rare for customers to become instantly passionate.
Okay.
What the trick is that it's, it could be not the product itself. It could be. So think about it this way: if you're over on the sustaining side of my innovation spectrum, say you're making a bowl of cereal, right? So you're coming out with a new type of cereal. It's very, very unlikely that the product itself is going to induce passion, and this is where you have to go outside of the product itself. And it could be, it's really, we're talking about purposeful branding, right? What are you going to do, sort of as a company, to build a relationship around what is really sort of a commodity? On the other end of the spectrum, and maybe the iPhone is an example of this, that the user interface, the user experience is so amazing that it creates passionate people. And so maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's the instantaneous example. Again, that the product experience is just so above and beyond that it creates passion, but it really varies based upon the product and the service and all the rest.
Yeah, but haven't you downloaded an app to your phone and go, oh my God, this is awesome? Like you really just, the moment you started using it, you were excited about it?
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's what I'm thinking about there.
Yeah, so I think that's sort of one end of the spectrum, and I think it's fairly rare. But I also think that has to do with the rise of user experience today and how important user experience is in the world. I think a lot of that has to do with in order to get customers to that level quickly, you have to sort of blow them away. And of course, that actually is difficult in this lean startup world where we're talking about minimum viable products. And so
right.
The minimum viable product for that, it may be, in order to be viable, right? The minimum is as important as viable. You might have to build out the product. It might have to be a good-looking product. The key is that we're trying to run experiments to validate that before we spend a year or 2 years or whatever building products that are, wow, they're beautiful products, but in the end, it isn't creating value sufficient for people to pay for it. And so if there's these experiments, this concept of experiments that you can run, without investing all of that time in simply your vision that's not been validated, and that's what we're trying to do with the lean startup stuff.
Awesome, Brant. Thank you so much for your time, and I want to thank all the people who are sticking around and listening to this. And you need to stick around because there's some valuable things that Vasil is going to mention in just a moment, and I don't want you to miss out on the opportunities. Mostly my ebook, which is free, and also Brant's book, which is not so much free, but it's awesome. I don't want everybody to get both of them. So you see, if you buy his, you get mine for free. Or if you get mine for free, you can buy his. Either or, whichever way you want to do it. His is The Lean Entrepreneur, How Visionaries Create Products, Innovate with New Ventures, and Disrupt Markets. You can find that at leanentrepreneur.co. Don't put the M at the end, just .co. And also mine, which just came out, Hazardous to Your Social Media Health. These are 50 previously condoned behaviors we no longer recommend. And you can get it at bit.ly/social_hazard. That's where you'll find it. Or you just go to my business site, sparkmediasolutions.com, and you'll find it there. In fact, I'm not officially announcing it until tomorrow, so you're all getting the preview of that new ebook. I want to thank everybody to be a part of this, and I want to turn this over to Vasil, who will finish with some last bit of information that you're going to very much want to hear. So hold on for just one more minute.
Thanks, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brett and David. Thank you so much for joining us today and providing this insightful discussion. I know that our attendees learned a lot. I know I did. And unfortunately, we run out of time right now, but I highly encourage everyone to follow up with our presenters on Twitter and get the books provided here as we sign off from this webinar. We'll leave that slide here so you can go to the website, download the books, buy the books, as well as before we wrap up, I would like to give a shout out to one of more partner, Startup Monthly. Is a seed fund headquartered at Silicon Valley. I highly encourage you also to go to the website startupmonthly.org and become a part of Startup Monthly family. You can get access to our growing community of founders, mentors, investors, and partners, as well as final invitation here before we sign off. If you found your product market fit and you would like to take it to the next step, I highly encourage you also to join us at the Startup Marketing Conference this spring, where you will learn from best digital marketing experts as well as growth experts as well. You can also, if you register in the next week or so, you can save 30% with code Startup Socials if you go to that very specific URL. I wanted to thank everyone once again for joining us today. Thank you, Brant. Thank you, David, so much. And I'll see everyone next time. Have a great day.